for the panel discussion on climate crisis, responses from the field. We are the first generation to feel the effect of climate change and the last generation who can do something about it, says former US President Barack Obama. Climate crisis is a term describing global warming and climate change and their consequences. The climate started changing a long time ago due to human activities, but we came to know only in the last century. If we do not do anything and things continue to go on like right now, then a day in future will come when humans will become extinct from the surface of the earth. For this panel discussion, we have Srimati M. Suchitra, the environmental journalist, to chair the panel discussion. Srimati M. Suchitra is an independent journalist focusing on ecology, equity, and sustainability. She is a former senior special correspondent at Down to Earth. She had worked at First Features and Footage, Kairali TV, New Indian Express, and India Today. I would like to extend a warm welcome to Srimati M. Suchitra to chair this panel discussion.
Thank you.
The panelists we have Sri K. Savadevan. He is an environmentalist and anti-nuclear activist. He is a regular contributor in publications on subjects like environment, development, energy, environmental economics, and fanaticism. He has authored many books and articles on cutting-edge environmental issues. I would like to welcome Sri K. Savadevan as a panelist. I also would like to welcome Sri Asim Mishra. He is an urban planner. He is presently associated with Homes in the City HIC program as program director. Over past 1 decade, he has worked on a range of issues such as decentralized governance and planning, climate change, informal economy, housing to urban poor, urban violence, poverty and inequality, environment, etc. in urban context. I would like to extend a warm welcome to Sri Asim Mishra. The next panelist we have Sri Claude Alvarez Alfonso. He is an Indian environmentalist based in Goa. He is the editor of the Other India Press and director of the Goa Foundation. He is also a member of the Supreme Court Monitoring Committee on Hazardous Waste constituted by the Supreme Court of India. I'd like to extend a warm welcome, sir. The next panelist we have Srimati Bhavana. I hope she has joined. She heads the India chapter of LEAD, a live global network of leaders from multiple disciplines and functions for the purpose of sustainable development. She is also a systems thinker and a certified climate adaptation trainer. She designs and delivers learnings in the areas of natural resource management, sustainable livelihoods, and water sanitation. Welcome, madam. The next panelist we have is Kashi Chaudhary. Kashi Chaudhary is a trans non-binary individual who is a practicing Buddhist monastic. They are currently with Anveshi Research Center for Women's Studies as a project fellow. They have more than a decade of experience in human rights and community work. They are also a student of Buddhist philosophy and psychology. Their primary areas of interest are faith, religion, mental health, and pure rights and their intersection. So welcome, Kashi Chaudhary. The time for seeking global solutions is running out. We can find suitable solutions only if we act together and in agreement, says Pope Francis. Recently, during the meeting with religious leaders and scientists, said, future generations will never forgive us if we miss the opportunity to protect our common home. We have inherited a garden. We must not leave a desert to our children. Once again, Pope Francis. With these words, I request the chair, Srimati M. Suchitra, to take over for the panel discussion.
Thank you, Brother Maria. And good morning, everybody. Let me first thank All India Association of Montfort Schools for making me a part of its fifth national conference and inviting me to chair this session. Thank you, Brother Wagis. Thank you, Brother George. I'm so happy that as the association has taken up this subject, climate crisis, as the broad subject of its conference. It's the most pressing subject of today's, what the world faces today, the most severe crisis. And as you know, uncontrolled burning of fossil fuels and many other human activities in the name of increasing growth, increasing production and development, Earth has suffered huge ecological devastation. Emission of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases has led to warming of the Earth and climate change. And for the past many years, we have been experiencing climate change in many forms like acute drought, extreme events of rain, then deadly floods and wildfires and severe cyclones. And as you know, oceans are rising, swallowing coastal villages and eating away shorelines. And in many parts of the world, acute famine is experienced. There's acute shortage of food and water, and thousands of people are dying of hunger and thirst, and crores of people are becoming environmental and climate change refugees. New epidemics like COVID are erupting. So it's a catastrophic phenomenon, and it's very sad, but it's real. And all these disasters, they are going to intensify. According to this IPCC report, it warns that the world is warming much faster than what the scientists thought previously. And IPCC also warns that in the next 20 to 30 years, we will cross the danger mark 1.5 degrees centigrade. And also by the turn of this century, we may reach even 6 degrees centigrade of warming. And this India's first climate change assessment reports warns that India may cross up to or may reach up to 4 degrees centigrade. So it's a huge, what we are going to face, a huge tragedy. And it's really life and death scenario. And we know even when this warming of the globe or global warming is a global phenomenon, we know every region of the earth, every region experiences the impacts of climate change. So along with the global discussions, global decision making, global policies and global actions at global and national level, we have to take action at the local level too, because the impact is experienced at the local level by the commons, by the communities. So how to go forward? What action we should take in mitigating and adapting to the climate change? This is what we have to think about. And as IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change warns, there is no time. We have reached that danger mark. So we have to act now. We can't wait. So how to go forward? What should be the action taken by the local communities? And as we know, everybody has to act. Civil society organization, local self-government institutions, religious organizations, academics, media, schools, teachers, students, even resident association. So now today we have 4 eminent panelists with us, and let us see, they have a good experience of working with communities and in rural and urban areas. So let us listen to them. So let me first invite Azim. He's working with Homes in the City initiative. I'm handing over the mic to Azim. Each panelist can speak up to 10 to 15 minutes. We are even now a bit late. So I think 10 to 15 minutes, I think each panelist can take.
So,
Azim is there?
yes, I'm here.
Okay, thank you, Azim.
So good morning, everyone. First and foremost, I would like to thank organizers for inviting us to share our experiences and work. I'm sharing my screen. So whenever we talk about this climate change or climate crisis, every time we think about why it happens, who is the responsible, and who is the victim of main victim of this climate crisis. So it's obvious that the carbon cake of north, I mean in the western countries, are very bigger than the southern part, and these are the poor people who are the most vulnerable due to climate crisis and its impact on our earth in our country. The HIC is basically a program which is managed by these 5 civil society organizations. Some are there are technical partners like ACT, Hunarsala and Sahajivan, and we have social organization KMVS and Setu, and they have different kind of expertise and they work together for the urban poor basically in the city of Bhuj. And HIC works on 3 principles. We believe that there should be a democratic decentralization, not only the governance, but the infrastructure and services also. There should be an equity within our society, and whatever we do should be ecologically conducive. And this is our approach. Basically, we collectivize people and empower them. We do lots of climate-friendly demonstrations. We do research and trainings, and we believe in networking, and we are associated with the different kind of networks within Gujarat as well as at the national level. Over the time period, this HIC program was started in 2008, and since last 13-14 years, we are able to form these 7-8 citizens collective in our city. This is Sakti Sangini, a collective of women living in farmer settlements. JSS works on water conservation and augmentation. We have this cattle rearing community. There is association within in the city. We have street vendors association. We have land and housing rights collective. We have Bhuj migrants laborers association and an association of female sex workers working in Kutch and Gujarat. And we have ward committees. Out of 11 wards within in our city, out of 6 wards we are able to form informally ward committee, and they are working with the citizens, making plans for development of their wards, and they are submitting it to the municipality. And in last few years, they are able to get funds through the municipal grants, and they are able to work as per the proposals made by the citizens in their wards. So in last 1 decade, we did some climate resilient demonstration in our city, and some of them I will share with you. The major impact happened in our city due to climate change. Either we face the drought or face flood situation in our cities. So we are able to demonstrate, like the first photographs is one of the colony which got flooded whenever there was heavy rainfall in our city. So we have made these water recharge plots and pits so that the entire water goes down and it recharges our groundwater within half an hour to 2 hours. And over the time period, what happened, the groundwater level has been increased, as well as the water quality has also improved in this area. The second photograph showing we had made one recharge borewell in Lalan College, which is a prominent college in our city. We also do with the primary schools and high schools for making the groundwater or roof rainwater recharge tanks, so that students can get a good quality water, because Bhuj comes in the arid region and we have a lot of water issues. After 3 years, only after 3 years, we get a good rainfall in here. Otherwise, there is always a rainfall deficit and we face acute water shortage. We also work for conserving these old water bodies which are ignored by the administration, and over the time period it is silted and its holding capacity of water goes down. So we are working on that, and several lakes has been rejuvenated in past few years. We are working with this migrant community, and migrant communities are living in very poor settlements. Even they don't have electric connections because they are residing illegally. We gave them these solar lights because they were facing problems to charge their mobile phones, as well as cooking, teaching their kids at night. And there were lots of safety issues for basically women at night. So they are using these kind of solar lights. We have also demonstrated because they don't have LPG connections, so they use this wood fire. So we have given some good quality gas stoves which are energy efficient. They take less wood, and they have very less smoke. And we have also demonstrated these biogas plants within a slum community. They are using it for their livelihood purposes because they supply this tiffin service, and they are using this biogas right now, and also using this solar cookers. We have also some techniques evolved over the time period in the city. This is called dome roofs, which is 5 to 6 degree temperature less inside these rooms if the roof is built by domes. So this is brick made roofs. And we have also demonstrated how we can recycle the debris, I mean construction waste, and make these kind of blocks. And through these recycling waste and these blocks, we are able to demonstrate some of the low cost houses for these slum dwellers in our city. Also an example of decentralized wastewater treatment plant. So this is one of the rehabilitation sites where we have built about 150 houses in a slum area under Rajiv Awas Yojana, and we have, because there is water is a very precious resource in our city, so we have built this DWATs in this for these 150 households, and they are using this water for flushing their toilets. This is the water tank where this recycled water goes, and then from this water tank every household is connected. And we also train people who have some land in the backyard or front yard. They are doing some kitchen gardening, and we always prefer to give them these local seeds and teach them how they can organically grow their vegetables and fruits in their premises. We also train youths and these adolescent girls groups about how they can make bioenzymes rather than using these chemical-based materials in their homes. We are working with these waste pickers, and this kind of scrap collection centers are run by a group of waste pickers in 2 sites in our city, and they are managing this entirely and recycling things. And our partner Khamir is using this recycled plastic, and they make these fabricated bags, and it's available online also. Anyone can buy it. And so by recycling this plastic, we are trying to reduce the waste in our city. And we also do plantation drives in our city. And every year during the monsoon season, we are able to collectively through the community drives about 2,000 to 2,500 trees plant. This year we have planted about 3,000 trees in our city through these community drives in each and every common plots and wherever public can access those areas. And we also do lots of research and trainings. Earlier we did lots of research on housing and livelihood issues for the informal sectors. But right now we are trying to understand the carbon footprint in our city at the household level, so that these people can get sensitized about their carbon footprint, and they can try to reduce their carbon footprint whatever way it is possible. The second thing, one thing is carbon footprint, but another thing, the urban poor who have very less contribution in terms of carbon footprint, but they are the most vulnerable. So with the SAPAC, we are doing a research on slum dwellers and informal sector workers on how they are getting impacted by increasing heat stress. And we are planning to come up with some action plan so that we can work with them in the coming days and reduce their vulnerability. So we do youth trainings and centralize them about different dynamics within a city, whether it is decentralized governance, planning, different kind of people are living in our cities, situation in slums and their livelihood issues, and how, where these youth can contribute to make in terms of climate change and environment in our city. So we work.
Hello.
Looks like they lost their connection.
Yeah. So can we move on to the other person, other panelist? Hello. I think Azim's connection has, something has happened.
Next speaker can.
Okay. Let's move on to Bhavana.
Thank you,
Hello.
Suchitra. Yeah, am I audible, Suchitra?
Yeah, very much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here, and deep appreciation to MSI for doing this kind of work and drawing everybody's attention to a very important subject. Topic and having such a variety of speakers throughout your sessions for 3 days. So wishing you all the best for the work. I represent LEAD, which stands for Leadership for Environment and Development. We are a global organization with our presence in 40 different countries. I head the India chapter, and our vision, mission, passion, action is all about building leadership for sustainability. I will link this work more when I progress with the talk, but here today.
Hello.
Bhavana's screen is frozen.
Yeah.
It might work. It might work well whenever she comes back. It might work well if she can switch off her video and speak. That might help with the bandwidth.
Yeah.
Bhavana, can you hear us? Her connection is also lost.
Should we wait or should we move on to? I think she has resumed.
There was some problem with my laptop and I lost it, Dana. So could you please...
Please turn on the microphone, Bhavana. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm not sure. Would Asim want to do his conclusion first?
Yes, I will take only 2-3 minutes. Hana, I lost my internet connection and I think my laptop has been break down. Hana. So I was saying that we work with several networks within Gujarat state as well as at the national level on different kind of issues like land rights and housing, climate change, etc. And I have 2 messages here. Like Suchitra was saying that how we can reduce our carbon footprint and how we can contribute towards reducing this problem. So there are two things we can do. We should think about our individual carbon footprints, how we can reduce it, our energy consumption, because until or unless we reduce our energy consumption by different ways, by using less transport means, by walking, or by using energy efficient appliances. So there are different ways. We should think about our energy consumption and work on how we can reduce our energy requirement. The second thing, we should think about how our cities can become self-sustainable, and because we should not take resources from outside, either it is energy or water requirement or food security. So each city could be made self-sustainable if it is well designed and planned. So the people should work with this public administration and think about how their cities could become the self-reliant and self-sufficient for its energy and other requirements. Thank you.
Suchitra, please unmute your microphone.
Thank you, Asim. Hello, Bhavana.
Yeah, I hope I'm audible.
Bhavana, can you resume?
Yeah, am I audible?
Yeah.
Thank you. So I just given a brief background about my organization LEAD. I wanted to cover this topic through by drawing your attention towards some of the core principles that can help us to address the crisis at whatever levels we are. When we think about climate crisis, it looks so huge. It is a global crisis. It is something that everybody is going to get impacted with, is already impacted with. So one limitation that happens is that when we think of such a huge global crisis, then one wonders, what role can I play? And I think that's where my focus will be throughout. When we are talking about community responses, what is it that we can really do? What is it that you and me can do? And what are some of the solutions? We need to focus on positive stories now. Because the crisis is known, it is inevitable. Now, even the climate skeptics, their voices are going lesser and lesser, lower, because it is very evident that climate change is a reality. We no longer are debating whether this is a fact or a myth. Yes, humankind, our planet has always gone through these cycles of huge change. But the kind of change, the pace at which it is happening now at the in our home on this planet is unprecedented, and hence a lot of projections, climate models. Different climate models suggest different outcomes. Some say that 2 degrees, after 2 degrees, some areas will be submerged. Some other models are suggesting if we mitigate, if we bring down our carbon deposition, certain things can still be done. So there is a lot of uncertainty, that is for sure. What is sure is, hence, one is uncertainty. Second is, what is certain is that there is a crisis. Now, I would like to invite all of you to look at this crisis in this way, that this is something that humankind, in addition to other challenges, is facing. Like coronavirus has impacted the whole world, it is climate change also that is impacting the whole world. Now, the antidote for this is, the vaccine for this is community resilience, communities' adaptive capacity being built up. When we talked about, there is something called as assessment report. Suchitra was talking about IPCC, and under every IPCC, we have these AR reports, which are called as assessment reports. The 4th assessment report and the 5th assessment report give a very interesting formula for combating climate change. I would just take a minute to share my screen and use the whiteboard to share what does this sorry, I can't see my white screen. Can you see the white screen?
We can see your computer screen.
Okay, I don't know why I can't see the white screen. I'll just try once more. Whiteboard. Yeah, so the IPCC AR report, this formula will help us understand what role can I play, be it in my school or in the community I serve, or even a small club which is around me. So what it says is this word vulnerability, it is often said that vulnerability is something, we have our own notions of vulnerable. And when we talk about communities and vulnerable communities, we think that only very poor people are vulnerable. Under climate crisis, vulnerability is there for every living, for life in all forms on this planet. But assessment report tells us about this formula, which says vulnerability actually is a function of adaptive capacity. It is adaptive capacity. And when we talk about adaptive capacity and the exposure to climate change, that's when our vulnerability is defined. So it basically says that for community resilience, for resilience to go up, it is basically our adaptive capacity which needs to be built up. By this, it really means that if we come down to climate as such, climate crisis, and we bring in, Suchitra was also talking about local solutions. What does this really translate into is that good governance, good development, and resilient communities are something which will actually help us build climate response. Now, any community which is prepared to deal with any crisis, it could be a crisis like coronavirus, and there are so many studies which have brought out a simple fact that communities which were well knit, which believed in collaboration, communities which had food grains stored, which had a community living, and communities essentially which were trained to face any kind of eventualities, dealt with coronavirus much better. And similar things will happen with climate crisis also, because when how climate crisis is going to impact which community, it is all a matter of time which will tell us. So either we'll have more droughts, or we'll have too much water, or we will have rainfall only in some number of days, which will just take away the entire food security becoming a crisis, or health hazards coming and just hitting us in our faces. So basically, the crisis can manifest in many, many ways. Now, when we talk about community resilience and community response to this, the community preparedness will need to be understood with some other principles. And that, in that case, the principle number one is that I'll keep typing down these principles also. These principles, the first principle is that everything is connected to everything. Now, this basically would mean that there is no one aspect that we can work on and say that our work is done. When we are talking about resilience, we have to talk about education, we have to talk about health, we have to talk about water conservation, all these things that are just talked about. We also have to talk about community organization, the networks, the sources of information, anything that enhances the capacity to adapt, which is called as the adaptive capacity, has to be built up. It will finally get reduced to good development and good governance. That is what will make our communities related. So if we are talking only about one aspect, say education, it has to translate into action in terms of some response that will help people do away with the ignorance. And that is the kind of education that then needs to get inbuilt. And when I say that everything is connected to everything, it basically will mean how one intervention, say, for example, education or health related or water conservation related, will actually impact everything else. And this is where the shift needs to be taken in our own systems, in our own mindsets. How do we see our communities? And this is the second principle I would invite you all to consider. That our notions of a community are very different. Sometimes we imagine that community is something which is, in villages or in slum areas or communities. We often think about communities which are poverty-stricken or marginalized. In terms of climate crisis, community would be any group of human beings of any age that can play a role, have to be sort of handled and worked upon. So, especially for you all, for the Montfort Institute, the kind of work that you are doing through your the social outreach and educational, through your educational institutions that you are building people and building students, I think the children are your biggest community, and that community has a major role to play. We often think children, can we give more of knowledge to them, we give experiences to them, but I think now there is a need to start seeing children as partners of change. Am I audible?
Some interruptions happen at times.
Can somebody please confirm if I'm audible?
Yes, you are.
Yeah. You are audible, Bhavna.
We lost her connection.
Okay. So let us come. Let her come back.
I'm around. I will just need to make two more points if I'm audible.
Yeah.
Yes.
You're audible.
Yeah, thank you. So I was saying that how can we see children partners of change today? Now, ignorance in any form is not something that helps. Ignorance is ignorance, and that ignorance cannot be fulfilled only by theoretical knowledge that adults or children are being imparted. So even for climate crisis, and this is the third principle I'm coming to, that even for to combat climate crisis and for communities to play a role, this action part has to be inbuilt in our day-to-day lives. Aseem towards the end talked about changing lifestyles. Now change is something which is difficult. Nobody likes change. Change is something that makes everybody uncomfortable. A very small exercise, if I were to do with you all right now, I can please request you to, raise your hands and fold your hands. Everybody please raise your hands and fold your hands. Fold. Now, just see which hand comes which is the hand which is on the top. If it's your right hand or your left hand, this is your natural way. Okay. Now, if I were to ask you to raise your hands again, and I'll request you to say you don't fold your hands with the hand which is on the top, fold it the other side. If your right hand was on the top, make your left hand on the top. Please do it right now and see how uncomfortable it is. And this is how change feels like. It's not easy. And hence we need to recognize that change is not easy and have that empathy for communities to slowly change. So it's easier said than done, saying that if you have cars, don't use cars, use public transport. We'll have to create an entire ecosystem that encourages and supports community transport instead of private transport, because convenience is something that runs human behavior. So how do we make this change convenient for people? And while dealing with this inconvenience, that's where, social institutions, educational institutions can play a major role. How students can make it a culture, how children can make it a culture in their schools. It can be fashionable to go sustainable, and how sustainability now needs to be a value and not an action, an activity through different little things that we do by, say, going for organic food or switching off our air conditioning. So those little patchworks that we are doing, if it can be seen holistically, and if children can be made to believe that you are the partners in change, you are the ones who can drive change, right from your own peers to families to your neighborhood, that really plays a lot of impact. And at LEAD, we have demonstrated that by working with 300 schools across the country, where children have taken it up on themselves to not only understand the importance of these actions, which are climate positive actions, climate responsive actions, but also they are influencing others. The next thing I wanted to share, the second last point, is that when I'm talking about school children or youth, essentially the how part of, when Aseem talked about all the good work that his organization is doing, that's the channel, that's the medium. This organization is doing such wonderful work. Now, organizations have their own limitations. If communities have to be built up, if community resilience and responsiveness has to be strengthened, then the solution, the how part, we have a lot of technological answers. We have solutions based on a lot of research that has happened globally now. What will be the vehicle to drive this change? At community level, it has to be leadership. Leadership at local level, leadership in every mohalla. Montfort has this great concept of neighborocracy, where in the neighborhood you have people who are taking charge of many other issues that a community faces. Climate crisis is only going to add to that part of in form of other manifestations. So how is it that we build local leadership and give them responsibility? Because clearly our leaders across sectors, segments have not really been able to gear up. Why did we need a Greta to leave her school and come on the road? Just because our global leaders have not really, have failed us in a way. So my request to you would then be that please think about building leadership in school children and communities and youth, which actually then responds to any crisis. Climate crisis will come in different ways, and it could only be one of the many other crises that humankind is to face. And my very last point is that we may also need to shift how we see things. At what lens are we seeing things? Because when we see things at a global level, it looks very unmanageable. It looks like none of us can play a role. But how local level things look very different. And here I would invite you to do another exercise, which possibly your children in schools will also be benefited. If you have a pen, please, if you could take a pen in your hand. In the last 2 minutes, I would really want to do this exercise. Just a pen or a pencil. And if you don't have, just a finger will do. And if you could raise this on top of your head and start moving it clockwise. Please move this clockwise and slowly bring it down. Just bring it down. And now you will suddenly see that your pen is moving anti-clockwise. Yeah. And this is a very interesting way to see how things look so different. We need to shift our focus on how things look at the local level. How is it that climate is going to impact the local level? Because when we listen to all the kind of crisis and the impacts that can happen globally, our mind goes into a tizzy, it freezes thinking that what is it that we can do? But local level will have different impacts and solutions will come locally. And that's the very strong resolve one community has to have. that our capacity to deal with any kind of eventuality is something that communities have to be prepared for. And I think that's where I would close by saying that we also need to celebrate positive stories. It is creating too much negativity, and I don't want to undermine the impact of the climate crisis, but we also need to look at the resilience and the positive stories of change and the possibilities that humankind can respond to. Yeah, with that, I will pause for now and will invite any questions later. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bhavna, for your enthusiastic speech. Next, Sahdevan.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
नमस्कार, मैं आपसे हिंदी में बात करूंगा। केरला सब लोग सुने होंगे, आया होगा केरल पे, तो
Language. Okay. So, Devin, is English possible? Because we have people from all over the country and many may not follow Hindi. Is English possible?
One of us can translate it, Korean. We can help him.
Can somebody translate? Sahdevan can speak in Hindi, and can somebody translate it in English?
Tashi, can you do that help?
Sure, brother.
Okay, thank you, Tashi. Please go ahead, Sahdevan.
ओके। केरल के बारे में ये कहा जाता है कि ये गॉड्स ओन कंट्री है। यहाँ पर जो क्लाइमेट के बारे में इतना वर्णन किया जाते हैं कि सब कुछ एक टूरिस्ट लोगों के लिए भी बहुत अट्रैक्टिव रहते। लेकिन पिछले कुछ से ये भी आप लोग सुने होंगे या देखे होंगे, केरल में बड़े लेवल पे फ्लड्स आ जाते हैं, साइक्लोन्स हिट करते हैं, लैंडस्लाइड्स बहुत बड़े तेजी से आता है। तो ये जो केरल के जो लोग अनुभव करता था, जो क्लाइमेटिक एक सुविधा, तो ये खत्म हो चुके। ये 2018 में करीबन 400 से ज्यादा लोग बड़े बाढ़ की वजह से मर गए। सरकार के हिसाब से 3000 करोड़ रुपए का नुकसान हुए। एर्नाकुलम, कोच्चि, त्रिशूर जैसे बड़े बड़े शहर, केरल के बड़े बड़े शहर पूरे के पूरे पानी में डूबे। तो जब इसके बारे में हम जब अनुभव किया और उसके बाद जब लोगों से बात की, अलग अलग ग्रुप के साथ बैठे, तो एक अलग प्रकार की एक रिस्पांस जो है वो ग्राउंड से हमको सुनाई दी। तो यहाँ के जो फिशरमैन कम्युनिटी और यहाँ के आदिवासी कम्युनिटी, तो उन्होंने ये बताया कि भाई पिछले 10-30 साल से हम इस प्रकार की नेचुरल कैलामिटीज को अनुभव करते जा रहे हैं।
Translation, please.
Yeah, can I quickly translate this?
Yes.
Please.
Yeah, thank you. So Sahdevanji is saying that it is said about Kerala that it is God's own country, and the environment and the weather and the climate over there is praised in poetry and so forth. But you might have heard in the recent times about Kerala's floods, but this is not so new. Kerala has been having floods and landslides, and the idea of this comfort of this environment is in Kerala has come to an end. It is no more that kind of comfort. In last few years, few hundred people, 400 people have died due to these floods and other environmental disasters. And as per government estimation, there is almost 3,000 crore rupees of loss of property and infrastructure and so forth. In the last few years, many big cities like Ernakulam, Cochin, and have submerged under the water because of the flood. So when we sit under these circumstances, when we sit and think about it with the communities, there are diverse responses come from the communities, especially with the fishermen community, who say that they have been facing these natural calamities from last 10-15 years. Over to you, Sahaden ji.
Yeah. तो बात हमें ये मालूम हो जाते हैं कि जब शहर जब डूबा जाते हैं, जो सिटी में जब प्रॉब्लम आते हैं, तो हमको लग रहा है कि नेचुरल कैलामिटीज हमारे पास आ गई। जो फ्लड बड़ा सीरियस इश्यूज है। जब तक केरल की जो शहर में रहने वाले लोग उनकी पहला मंजिल डूबे, उससे भी निकल के जब सेकंड फ्लोर में पानी आए, तब तक तो वो लगा कि हम सेफ हैं। तो यही रिस्पांस था जो सिटीज के लोगों का। तो जब वायनाड में जो आदिवासी लोग रहते थे, जो केरल के कोस्टल एरिया में जो फिशरमैन रहते थे, वो हर साल जब इस प्रकार की जो मानसून सीजन में तो जाते रिलीफ कैंप में, या आदिवासी लोगों को वो भी नहीं है, वो कहीं अपने जंगल एरिया में कहीं पे सेफ जगह में रहते थे। तो बात में जो कहना चाहते हैं कि जब तक हमारे जो हमारे शरीर में जब छू जाते हैं जो शहर की, जो मिडिल क्लास की, तब जाके हम इस चीज को समझने का प्रयास करते हैं। और उसमें भी हम कुछ टेक्नोलॉजी द्वारा कुछ नए आइडियाज लाके इसको किस तरह से इस प्रॉब्लम्स को सोल्व किया जा सकते हैं, इसके बारे में सोच रहे हैं। और हमारे जो कंफर्ट लाइफस्टाइल है उसमें थोड़ा भी चेंज करने के लिए तैयार नहीं है। और हम सोचते हैं कि यहाँ कुछ ग्रीन टेक्नोलॉजी, कुछ और तरीके से यही सुविधाएं प्राप्त करके हम आगे निकल सकते हैं, जिसके बारे में हमें अभी बहुत सीरियसली सोचना चाहिए, ये हो सकते हैं या नहीं।
I'll quickly translate this. So we become, so Sahaden ji is saying that we become aware of the problem when it actually, our cities get submerged, and when the first floor or the second floor of the buildings in the cities are submerged in the water, unless our safety is not threatened in the cities, we don't think there is a problem. As long as it has been happening in tribal areas with tribal people in Wayanad or fishermen in the coastal Kerala, the crisis is not recognized as a crisis. When we basically the middle class in the city are hit by the problem, when they are hurt, that is when the problem of the crisis is seen as one. And even then, with the help of technology and so on and so forth, we want to solve the problem and we want to address this, because the middle class in cities and urban spaces are suffering. But we do not want to make any changes in the comfort of our life. So it is high time that we think about employing green energies and actually changing things how we do. Over to you, Sahaden ji.
तो मेरा बात ये है कि हम जिस प्रकार से जो चर्चा चल रहे हैं, जो अलग अलग क्लाइमेट क्राइसिस के संबंध में, और उसको किस प्रकार से हम उसको मिटिगेट कर सकते हैं, या ये जो पूरी डिस्कशन की जो प्लेटफॉर्म, उसमें भी चेंजेस लाना जरूरी है। और उसमें खास करके जो यंग जनरेशन बड़े पैमाने पे उनके रोल रहना चाहिए, क्योंकि हमारे जैसे जो लोग हैं, जो ओल्ड जनरेशन है, जिन्होंने क्राइसिस को यहाँ तक लाया गया है, वही उनकी जो माइंडसेट है, उसी में से ही जो इसका सोल्यूशन निकल जाएगा। आपको जो स्टूडेंट्स लोग हैं, मैं पिछले कुछ साल में केरल के बहुत यंगस्टर्स के साथ, कॉलेज स्टूडेंट्स और यूथ के साथ चर्चा की, उनके साथ काम किए, और उसमें हमेशा ये गिल्टी फील होता। हमने ये सब जो क्लाइमेटिक हैवोस जो बनाए हैं, और हम इनको बच्चों को कह रहे हैं कि तुम संभालो, तो नए आइडियाज, नए सोच लाने का एक प्रयास जो है वो नौजवान लोगों के साथ से ही शुरू होना चाहिए। जो ऑलरेडी इस प्रॉब्लम को क्रिएट किए हुए लोग जो सजेस्ट कर रहे हैं उसमें कितना वो एक प्रकार की सोल्यूशन हो या एक प्रकार की प्रॉब्लम क्रिएट करेंगे, ये तो हम सोच भी नहीं सकते हैं।
I'll quickly translate this again. So Sahadevanji is saying that the way the discussion about mitigating climate crisis, the way happens, that very platform need to be changed. The very discussion platform, the way the framework need to be changed, and more and more younger generation people need to take part and play a crucial role in it, because generations like mine have brought this crisis to this point, and we are not in a position or a place to solve it. And especially in the last few years, when we work with young people, I feel extremely guilty for what we have done and how we brought this crisis to this point. And also, we need to bring in new efforts. New efforts need to be brought by younger generations in order to address this problem. Over to you, Sahadevanji.
और हर एक के लिए जो सोल्यूशन के लिए हम जो हमारे जो मीडिया है या हमारे जो गवर्नमेंट इंस्टीट्यूशंस और एजेंसीज, ये सभी क्वेश्चन की तरफ ही देख रहे हैं। और मैं आपसे ये पूछना चाहता हूँ, भारत में ये केरल स्टेट में 2020 जनवरी 1 तारीख को 5000 से ज्यादा स्टूडेंट क्लाइमेट इश्यूज के ऊपर एक बड़ा सा क्लाइमेट सर्कल प्रोग्राम बनाया। तो 5000 स्टूडेंट्स, कॉलेज और +1 +2 के स्टूडेंट्स, यहाँ के कोई मीडिया को उसके बारे में एक शब्द भी लिखने के लिए कोई ये नहीं है। और वही मीडिया जब कोपेनहेगन में या और कहीं पे दोहा में कुछ 50 लोग जब बैनर, या लंदन में या कहीं और वेस्टर्न कंट्रीज में 7, 5, 10, 20, 50 लोग जब बैनर बड़ा खड़ा करके बैठे हैं तो एक बहुत बड़ा इश्यू बनते हैं। और हमें भारत में जिस प्रकार की आंदोलन चल रहा है उसके बारे में कुछ चिंता नहीं। तो सोच हमेशा वेस्टर्न की तरफ देख रहे हैं, वहां से क्या निकल के आ रहा है। तो ये इस एटीट्यूड को भी हमें चेंज करना है, और इसके लिए हमें विद्यार्थी लोग और स्कूल्स, स्टूडेंट्स, सभी कम्युनिटी के लोगों का एक बहुत बड़े रोल निभाना होगा।
So to quickly summarize that again, so the solution that often the media or the government agencies sort out is also not either efficient or sufficient enough, and also even the media, the way it portrays, even when we did so much of work with a lot of young people in Kerala, building up a proposal towards environment sustainability and so forth, no media ever wrote about it, not even one single word about it. But if something happens in Copenhagen or somewhere else, that becomes a big news, and it gets reflected in the media as such. So we still have this attitude of looking at West for everything, and I think that attitude is also what one need to change. Over to you, Sahadevanji.
तो अभी भी yes.
Could you please wind up in 2-3 minutes, because there is one more speaker and we have to have interactive session, so we can speak more on the interactive session.
Right. Yeah. मुझे बस एक और कहना है, जितना भी क्लाइमेट क्राइसिस हमारे या बड़े-बड़े चैलेंजेस हमारे समाज के इसमें जब आते हैं, क्राइसिस के रूप से आ जाते हैं, तो हमें हमारे गवर्नमेंट किस प्रकार की उसकी क्राइसिस मिटिगेशन के लिए जो काम कर रहे हैं, हमें पता चल रहा है कि ये सेम पैटर्न जो जिस इसमें जो क्राइसिस तक पहुंचा दिए, सेम पैटर्न वो अपना रहे हैं। अब केरल में मैं एक उदाहरण और दे रहा हूँ, बस उसमें से खत्म कर रहा हूँ। 35 साल पहले जब हमने सोशल फॉरेस्ट्री के इसमें जब जैसे तरीके से एकेशिया, यूकैलिप्टस प्रकार जैसे प्लांट्स जब वेस्टर्न कट के नेचुरल फॉरेस्ट काट करके ये जो लगा रहे थे प्लांटेशन, तो हम उसके विरोध कर रहे थे और उस समय हमें एंटी डेवलपमेंटलिस्ट या कोई विकास विरोधी सब करके हमें जेल में भेजा गया है और अरेस्ट किया गया है, बहुत सारे इश्यूज बनाए। जो 35 साल के बाद सरकार खुद उसके बारे में ये बताया कि भाई ये अपने वेस्टर्न घाट की जो ग्राउंड वाटर रिजर्व के लिए खतरा है और हम काट के उसको स्लोली उसको ग्रेजुअली उसको फेस आउट करूंगा। ये उनके 2021 की इकोनॉमिक रिव्यू में उन्होंने लिखा था। इस साल के अंदर ये से नुकसान किया है और उसके पहले जिस प्रकार से लोगों ने चेतावनी दी उसका सब कोई प्रकार की रीथिंकिंग कुछ नहीं, सेम पैटर्न और भी आगे निकल आने वाला है। तो हमें उसके ये जो पैटर्न है, इसकी नीति है, उसके बारे में बहुत गंभीरता से सोचेंगे और सेम कंफर्ट इस पे लेवल में रह के हमें इस क्लाइमेट क्राइसिस को मिटाना असंभव है। बस मुझे इतना ही कहना है और इसके लिए मुझे जो समय दी है आभार।
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Should I quickly, okay, I'll just quickly say, so basically Sadevan is saying that if, the way the government agencies are working towards addressing or mitigating the climate crisis is with the same attitude that they actually have created the climate crisis. So with that attitude, it is not going to change. And he basically gave an example about the eucalyptus plantations and other plantations that have been set up in Kerala, cutting out natural forests, and how it has been dealt with in short. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Tashi, for translation. And Tashi, you can continue.
Sure. So, thank you for rest of the panelists for giving that insight, sharing that insightful information and work that you're doing. So, outright, I need to start by saying that I'm not an environmental activist per se, and of course, you might wonder what I'm doing here. Although most of my activism is around queer rights and gender and sexual minorities in and around Hyderabad mostly, I like to believe that I have a very intimate relationship with nature, like many people, I believe. And being a Buddhist, I took refuge, in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. But I also consider that my primary source of refuge is nature. And it helped me survive many turbulent times in life. And it continues to nurture me and take care of me, I think, in many ways. So it is not really romanticizing when I say that I share a very special relationship of love and care with nature. And in everyday life, I basically consciously think about what can I do or can avoid doing in order to take care of the nature that takes care of me. So I thought today I'll share probably my loved thoughts and small actions, what possibly could contribute to the well-being of the nature that keeps us all of us alive. So to begin with, when we all know that this particular conference draws inspiration from Lord C, that written by Pope Francis. At one point in the document that His Holiness says that if we approach nature and the environment without this openness to awe and wonder, if we no longer speak the language of fraternity and beauty in our relationship with the world, our attitude will be that of masters, consumers, ruthless exploiters, unable to set limits on their immediate needs. So the question arises is that did we already become this ruthless consumer exploitators, or are we still on the way to become, I think? If that's the question, I think I don't want to really sweeten it, but I think we already are there. We are this ruthless consumer exploitators that we are today as humans, as civilized. The only thing I think the upper limit of this kind of progress, this kind of growth, is that the end of life as we know. So we can still say, because we all are alive and still living and breathing, we can say that there is still scope for us to kind of take a U-turn, change our course of journey, not of course for our own sake, but also for the sake of an entire planet. So having said that, in recent times, I've come across this news item that said that how 20 major corporations contribute towards almost 35% of all energy-related carbon dioxide and methane worldwide, release, totaling to almost some 480 billion tons of carbon dioxide since 1965. So around this article, many people said that, of course, it's corporations that do quite a lot of environmental damage, which is true. And they said that it is not individuals who can do much. So it is corporations who should take more responsibility. Although I agree with it, it numerically makes sense that it is few corporations that need to, get or take up responsibility and do something. But I also recognize the kind of tough reality we live in, I think. So when was the last time a big corporation actually freely took responsibility for anything? Especially, and no matter how public the disasters were. If we really think back, I think we can safely say that really never. So we all can logically assume that, if we sit around and actually wait for corporations to take the responsibility, become environmental friendly, change their production technology and so on and so forth, that's not going to happen. Right? And if even we wish them to take responsibility and if we want them to take responsibility, that can only happen if we as people are willing to take accountability and responsibility ourselves in our own lives to begin with. So it comes back to us. It comes back to the individuals at the end of the day, I think, as collectives, as people. And this reminds me one more thing about recent COVID pandemic lockdown. Many people said that how there are clear skies during the lockdowns. There's no, transport happening, people going out much, everyone is in their homes. But people seem to forget how much sitting at homes also kind of costed environment because of the rise in online deliveries. The package garbage alone generated in this last 1 year must be immense, which seems to be completely ignored. I mean, the point I'm trying to make is that we are not even in a position to see what kind of harms we are causing environment. Taking responsibility is a little far-fetched at this point, I think, honestly, because we need to first see that we are strangling environment in multiple ways, and trying to ease one is not enough. And especially that trying to ease one is only when it comes to cost our lives, literally, like COVID. And the next immediate question that comes to my head always is that the constant thing about shifting from fossil fuels to green energies and all that, which is, I believe, very important and essential, no doubt about it. But I also think it is not enough in itself, especially if the kind of the consumption, the way we are doing, no matter if a majority of energy is replaced with solar, wind, and so forth, if the consumption continues to the way that it is happening today and progresses, I don't think even green energies can do enough of saving this planet, because we have become this really destructive beings with the kind of consumption and the kind of development we are seeking. As simple as example, everyone's, I don't know how many people, iPhone here, not to make any of you feel guilty, but every year a new iPhone comes and people change that iPhone whether they need it or not. So there's no thinking about, do I need it, or is it just a thrill of the technology advancement and I want to have it, as simply as that. So we consume like there is no end to it. Like unless this ruthless consumption is transformed into a compassionate consumption, we can't be helped, I think. It is no more about the luxury consumption, I think, because even basic needs such as food, clothes, and housing, our corporations and middle class and upper middle class people have successfully turned them, even those basic needs, as luxurious needs in some sense, that it is costing every being that lives on this planet because of what is happening. Looks like the phrase also, the live like it is your last day, has been really turned into something else. It is no more about considering every day to be a possible last day, to be kind, caring, and not to do any wrong and be good, but it is becoming living every day with an unquenchable desire to experience, to know everything, to have everything. And that is dangerous, I think, in many ways. So I think in many ways, our education system has a lot to do with this, because growing up for children and young people, they're all taught to be successful. And the success is often reflected in how much you have. So if you're successful, you're supposed to have more cars, more houses, more and more of everything, basically. And it also implies that never stop working. So you always work hard, you achieve everything, never fail, always be productive. This is the kind of thinking that is inculcated in young kids, and we expect them to grow up and be different, which I think ironically is not possible in any way. And it is really not, when is it we ever teach anyone that in schools and colleges or at homes that being generous, being patient, being kind, and caring, these are ideals that one need to have. That kind of, we moved far away from that, I think. And what we need to have, our human nature succeed, that's no more really pursued as success. So the education system, may well be making a lot of successful humans, but not giving any chance for the humanity to succeed, I think, at the best. Revisiting our understanding of success and redefining, that is important, I think, beginning at schools and colleges. Its very essence need to be looked at means to be success in this time and era. And no one can take this than education institutions, I think. And one consequence of this must be to transform the ruthless exploitator consumer that Pope Francis refers to a mindful, compassionate consumer. Of course, one of the loosely and randomly repeatedly used word of this 21st century is mindfulness. So sorry to bring it in here, but I think seen cases of mental health and well-being, physical well-being, and so on and so forth. I think it is time to expand the scope of this mindfulness from an individual-centric well-being to encompass a well-being of a larger world and the nature it inhabits. So one of the Buddhist psychologists, Jonna Massey, says, we can choose life even as we face global climate disruption, war encompassing nuclear contamination, hydrofracking, mountaintop removal mining, tar sand extractions, deep sea. We can still choose life. We can still act for the sake of a livable world. She also goes on to say that we can meet our needs without destroying our life support system. Like she also says that we need to move from industrial growth society to life-sustaining society, that which operates within the carrying capacity of its life support system, regional and planetary, not both with its resources that it consumes and also the waste it produces. So to make this possible, it is important for us to have a deeper relationship with our consumption. What we are consuming, why we are consuming, and how, and where this is coming from, what we are consuming, where it is coming from. So there is no magical solution to this from either the spiritual world or a one-stop legal solution from the democratic frameworks, I believe. This requires at an individual level as well as at a collective level a lot of work that need to be done. We have to move from a prideful pasts and the aspirational futures to present moment, to be fully present, to recognize, to see what we are doing to our bodies, to the plants that feed us, to the water bodies that quench our thirst, and wildlife that keeps the ecosystem alive. So what does this mindful and compassionate consumption entails? So just few points I shared and I'll end it. Interdependent nature of existence, like what earlier Bhavana said, everything is connected to everything. I am asking to look a little further and say that everything exists interdependent to each other. Nothing exists really in this, as much as this individualistic world we live in, with a constant drive to become more independent and powerful and whatever. The reality is that we are anything but independent. Like one of the Buddhist monk, Thich Nhat Hanh, says that all phenomena are interdependent, endlessly interwoven. This is also the foundation of the non-violence that he talks about. He calls it the principle of interbeing. He says that we are interbeing, we are intertwined with everything. We don't exist in solitary. We don't exist as this independent, solid entities, but rather so much dependent on so many beings. Like, for example, as much as this simple thing, conference to happen for 2 days, there's so many causes and conditions need to come in place to make it happen. And for us to sit here and talk, so many things need to fall in place for it to happen. To consider us as these independent beings who can live independent lives itself has so much of a problem in it, I think. I mean, as simple as even a biologist called Lewis Thomas, he says that he describes how our human bodies are shared, rented, and occupied by countless other tiny organisms without whom we couldn't move a muscle, drum a finger, or think a thought. It's not, other than human cells, there is so many other organisms that actually inhabit in our body, making it function. So the idea of that we are independent is an illusion. To recognize that we dependently exist and everything arises on dependent other things is important, I think. And next one, of course, I think knowing our needs and differentiating them from our wants and desires is important. As much as we all talk about this is not about renouncing the world, but this is rather being, more mindful about recognizing our needs, because our wants and desires often harm us to begin with, including harming the environment. So can we look at how can we be more conscious about what is the need and how can I differentiate from my want and desire? And the other one, the immediate one, is that what are the less harmful ways of fulfilling these needs? So often the idea from most humans is that, oh, I can't do everything. I can't save the world. I can't save the environment. So let me not do anything. Let me go on with whatever I'm doing. But that's, so just because I can't, kind of win over the entire world, save the entire world. I don't want to do anything. I think that's really a very dangerous way of shrugging of responsibility on the name of absolutism. So one need to come out of that and figure out in minimum ways in everyday life, what are the least and least harmful ways. So our existence itself is harmful to nature to begin with, I think, in many ways. But can we figure out the least harmful ways to fulfill our needs? And then going forth, can our consumption be rooted in care towards ourselves and to the society and to the environment? Because our consumption is no more about caring with increasing diabetes, heart strokes. It's visible we don't care of our own bodies, let alone caring about environment. So can we go back caring about our own selves, our own bodies, and then eventually caring our environment and about environment and the society? And the products that we use, can we become little more with everything on our fingertips these days, especially the middle class, upper middle class educated? Can we know what products are we using, how they are produced, what it entails, what harm the production is doing? Can we move to the alternative? Can we think about that? And most importantly, I think for this kind of the world we live in, reclaiming our control, our agency and choice. We are no more really beings of our own choice and agency. We are driven by the social media. We live in the Google that we ask answers for, and we follow everything that throws at us. We pick up almost everything that possibly is given to us in the virtual world we live in. So can we reclaim our agency and choice, that actually think what we are picking up, what we are choosing, is it really my choice, or how much of it is dictated to me by the, an entirely different world that I think I'm free of? And changing our habitual patterns, or slowly, step by step, day by day, are these things doable in our life, and how can these things be cultivated in our schools and colleges among younger generation is what one need to think about, I think. But having said these things, I also want to say that if one doesn't, in any environmental activism, if you don't include human rights, think about margins, people in the margins, in the societies in the margins, I think it's not complete as an environmental activism. And similarly, if you talk about human rights and if you don't talk about environmental activism, I think that human rights work is also not complete in itself, I think. I'll cut it short because of the short of time. Just to end with a quote from, again, Thich Nhat Hanh. Once when he was asked, what do we need to do to save our world? And he responds, what we most need to do, he replied, is hear within us the sounds of the earth crying. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Tachi. And now we are a bit late. It's 12:26. Can we move on to the question and answer session? Audience can raise their questions to the panelists. Now it's the time for interaction. You can interact with the panelists. They have given you good, very, very serious views about the local level interaction, how we should focus on individually how we should change all these things. So let us interact with them. We'll get more views.
Brother Pratap is raising his hand.
I'm immensely impressed by the panelists, first for your sharing and a lot of very powerful and very sometimes disturbing input and sharing that you have given. It's very, very impressive, and I appreciate all of you from the bottom of my heart. I am extremely impressed by the mission that Mr. Azim Sher Mishra is involved. Would like to know, is your organization working only in Rajasthan area or other parts of India? Thank you.
The project in which I am engaged only focus on Bhuj city in Kutch, Gujarat. But the partner organizations who are associated with this program are working in the entire Gujarat and outside Gujarat also. And some of them are working at international level also, like Hunarsala Foundation works on relief work in Nepal and other places whenever earthquake and other things happen over there.
can see only 2-3 people on the screen, so I can see somebody raising their hand. Please come up with your questions. We can extend our session a bit more, so you can don't worry about the time. You can ask your questions to the panelists.
I wanted to ask Mr. Sahadevan. Now, one of the areas that he has been particularly involved is the way he has been mobilizing young people to combat climate change. Students, civil society organizations, and the public. And he is one of those, the two areas that he is particularly involved in. One is peace building, the other is mobilizing people around climate crisis and combating it. I really want to know, we have 140,000 students in our institutions. How can we network? How can we inspire? And how can we mobilize so that there is a common action that is made possible? Sahadevan, also the other panelists, Bhavana particularly, who has been working with around 300 education institutions. Others, could you tell us?
Hello, welcome. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
2020 और 19 और 20 के बीच में हमने खास करके जो त्रिशूर शहर के करीबन 80 to 90 कॉलेजेस और हायर सेकेंडरी स्कूल्स के बच्चों के साथ मिलकर स्टूडेंट्स फॉर क्लाइमेट रेसिलियंस करके लूज ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, उसमें कोई खास ऑर्गेनाइजेशन सेटअप ये सब नहीं की। तो उसमें बहुत सारे अलग अलग क्लासेस स्टूडेंट्स के साथ ये विषय के साथ संबंध करके क्वेश्चनेयर बनाना, अलग अलग प्रकार की कार्यक्रम बनाना, ये हमने एक 6 महीना कंटिन्यूस की। हमारा एक आशा ये था कि वो आगे भी चले, लेकिन आप सबको मालूम है 2020 मार्च के बाद पूरे लॉकडाउन हमारे सभी कार्यक्रम को उल्टा कर दिया। और इसमें हमने ये देखा कि हमने पिछले बहुत साल से यंगस्टर्स के साथ अलग अलग प्रकार से जब कॉन्टैक्ट कर रहे हैं, बात कर रहे हैं, लेकिन 2018 की जो केरल में जो फ्लड हुई उसके बाद बच्चों में इस क्लाइमेट क्राइसिस और उसकी जो चैलेंजेस के बारे में कुछ जागृति हुई। ये उस क्लाइमेट स्टूडेंट्स फॉर क्लाइमेट रेसिलियंस जो ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है उसको ऑर्गेनाइज करने में कुछ मदद की। और बड़े एज लोगों से भी यंगस्टर्स को इस कंसर्न थोड़ा ज्यादा है, ये भी हमें समझ में आए। तो मुझे लगता है कि हमें उनसे बहुत सारे अलग अलग एक्टिविटीज के बारे में जब बात करने लगे तो बहुत सारे ऐसे प्रपोजल आए, हम किस प्रकार से हमारे कार्बन फुटप्रिंट या हमारे जो जीवन शैली में क्या बदलाव ला सकते हैं, इस प्रकार के सवाल आए। खुद ही जो क्लाइमेट चेंज के खिलाफ में हमारे जो भी कार्यक्रम बनाएगा, जो भी कैंपेन करेंगे, उसमें जितना हो सके उस कम कार्बन एमिशन हो, इस प्रकार की सोच उनमें बहुत सारे हैं। तो हमने ये भी जरूरी उस विषय के साथ छोड़ के हम बताता था कि केवल इंडिविजुअल लेवल में हम जिस प्रकार से बदलाव लाना चाहते हैं उससे कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ने वाला है, बल्कि इस सिस्टम को भी हम क्वेश्चन करते रहना जरूरी है। इंडिविजुअल लेवल पे हमारा जो जिस प्रकार के कार्बन एमिशन कम करने का प्रयास जारी रहेंगे और रखना है, उतना ही इम्पोर्टेंट इस गवर्नमेंट और जिसकी आर्थिक नीति, इकोनॉमिक पॉलिसी, ये डेवलपमेंट पॉलिसी, ये सबको क्वेश्चन करे बिना हम इसको आगे नहीं ले जा सकते। तो इस हमारे जो 5000 स्टूडेंट्स जब क्लाइमेट सर्कल बनाए 2020 जनवरी 1, तो उसका मेन स्लोगन या मेन मुद्दा ये था कि चेंज इकोनॉमी नॉट द क्लाइमेट। ये बड़े स्पष्ट रूप से हमने ये बात हमने बच्चों के साथ हमेशा के लिए शेयर किया कि एक इम्पोर्टेंट ये रहा। तो उसके साथ बच्चों के साथ वो उस विषय को लेके बहुत सारे छोटे छोटे लीफलेट्स ये सब बनाए हैं, और हमें ये आगे कंटिन्यू नहीं कर पाए क्योंकि ये उसके बाद स्कूल्स ये सब बंद पड़े, कॉलेजेस बंद पड़े। तो मुझे लगता है कि लेकिन इस प्रकार की एक अर्जेंसी लोगों में फील हो रहा है, और उस प्रकार की एक नेटवर्क स्टूडेंट्स के साथ और यंगस्टर्स के साथ बनाना इस संदर्भ में और पहले से भी ज्यादा आसान रहेगा, और उनके ही लीडरशिप में इस कार्यक्रम को आगे ले जाना चाहिए।
Brother Verghese, do you need translation or is it okay?
Translation, please. Time. You need translation, Brother George?
Yeah, please. Okay. I'll quickly do it.
Please.
Yeah,
Tashi, yes, thank you.
So between 2019 and 2020, in Thrissur, our organization started working with 80 to 90 colleges and high secondary schools, forming a coalition of students of climate resilience. We made questionnaires and other kinds of activities and worked for around 6 months. We did hope to continue the work, but of course, like everyone, most of the things in the world came to halt because of COVID. Our work also has come to a halt. And after the flood situation in Kerala, it seemed like there's an awakened interest in the student community about climate change, and that itself also helped them to organize around something of a Students for Climate Change program. And when we engaged with school children and young people, they were also interested to know how they could reduce their carbon footprint, and were curious to make lifestyle changes in order to able to do that. So Sahadevanji also says that it is not enough to emphasize just on the individual change and emphasizing on individuals as such, but one need to look at the larger systemic problems and question them and challenge them, and also look at the policy making and the government programs in order to address the overall environmental issue as such. Yeah.
Asim and Bhavna, do you want to add some more points to this question?
In fact, Bhavana, if Bhavana can, especially how we can, the work that she is doing and how we can connect with what she is doing, because I think she is doing very important work of building leaders. How can we, our institutions and our educational community can connect this, I think. And then I was also interested in listening to Tashi on what is the process that is on in their own monastic formation that helps them to be connected to nature. That is something that, so if Bhavana can.
Yeah, Bhavna, could you please?
Bhavana seems to be not in the session. I don't see her.
Bhavna left?
Yeah.
Maybe some technological issues. Then Tashi, could you please answer?
Yeah, so interestingly, I think the whole idea of to be respectful and caring and towards the environment is not really a new thing, not the post-industrial era or the climate change, all that. When I look at our own, Buddhist stories, there's a story in one of the, Buddhist texts that talks about how there's a person who was striking down a tree, the tree spirit in that went to Buddha and complained that, this person is striking down the tree. So Buddha kind of, interferes and asks him to stop it. And from that point, it also becomes a vow. Actually, monastics are not allowed to cut trees. So that's one of the vows to begin with. And but nonetheless, in Buddhism, one is the interdependent origination is the important aspect, and you also look at all sentient beings are intertwined with nature, and the respect and the love and the concern need to be all sentient beings, not just humans, fellow human beings, but it need to be extended to all other animals, and it is important. Their well-being is as important as humans' well-being is. That common understanding need to be there. For example, in one of the prayer, when we say this, that may all misdeeds of digging the ground, removing stones, polluting the fireplace, cutting wood, disturbing the water, building houses, plowing the fields, building enclosures for animals, may all this be purified. So it's even as simple as moving stones, or in a monastery setup, there's a particular day in a month that we have in most of the Tibetan monasteries, especially, that we are supposed to do a prayer regretting that the harm that we are causing around in order to live, even as building a house or moving a stone or using the water, and need to be mindful about all the other animals that we are inhabiting. Of course, one of the principle is the non-violence. You can't kill any being in any monastery. Anyone, whether you're monastic or non, whoever is staying, they need to abide by that. You engage actively avoiding killing anything. That doesn't mean that you can't walk on the ground, but you be careful wherever you can avoid, how much ever you can avoid it. And not in a sense of that you want to be good, but also that the other being, as much as you doesn't want to suffer, as much as you don't want to suffer, the other being also doesn't want to suffer, whether it is an ant, whether it has great intelligence or mind, doesn't matter. Same like a human being avoids pain and suffering, an animal also avoids pain and suffering, and any other being in the nature. So that common understanding is what cultivated among monastics, I think. And that's how monastics are also maintained with as much as possible non-violence as a principle on the campus, and also considering the pain and harm and hurt that we cause other beings and the nature itself, making it part of our prayers is also one of the practice that is followed, to remain mindful of what harm that our existence itself can cause.
Thank you. Thank you, Tashi. Thank you, Tashi, for your enlightening speech on principle of non-violence. And is there any more questions? Or can I sum up? Okay, I think there is no more questions. So I'm just summing up our session. Thank you, Tashi, and thank you, Sahadevan. Bhavana is not. Thank you, Asim. And Asim was talking about the urban part of the scenario, how to, since a city is a heat island, how to conserve water, how to do rainwater harvesting. And he was talking about the ward level, very local level intervention should be needed. So that was what Asim was saying. And Sahadevan was talking about Kerala scenario and how the same thing, same development perception, there is no change in the perspectives of development, how it should be changed to achieve the goal of mitigating climate change or adapting to climate changes, impacts of climate change. So if you want to reduce the impacts of climate change, then how to change the perspectives, development perspective. That was what Sahadevan was saying. And Bhavana was talking about how to build a resilient society, and she was talking how the part of the children, how to change the perspectives about community, and how everything is connected to each other. How that she was talking about the interdependence, and Tashi was talking about the whole thing in another perspective. The whole thing, the same thing comes when you want to change something. you have to change when you want to changing the corporates. Oh, it's very difficult here, but the responsibility is coming back to us. So how to change our perspective, how to change our lifestyles. And he was talking about the responsible consumption. When you are consuming consumption and about generating waste. So when you are consuming something, you have to know who is producing that, and the way it's produced, and how much we should consume, and how much waste we are generating. So the thing is that when we are talking about the local level interventions, we have to have individual. We have to act individually as well as we have to act as a community. The intervention should be in all levels. The local self-governments, as Asim has pointed out, the local self-governments, community organizations, and as Sahadevan pointed out, the systemic changes and the perspective changes, it should come. And how to change individually our own views. That was what Tashi was focusing on, and above all, the principle of non-violence. So thank you panelists for your really enthusiastic and enlightening speeches. So let me sum up this session because it's already 12:45. So I'm handing over the mic to Brother Susan. Maria Susan.
Thank you, ma'am. It was a wonderful session that